In this video, we're going to go over the basics of musical scales. Scales form the basis for melody and harmony in music, and you can think of them as a palette of notes that we've decided that work well together, either when played one after another as a melody or at the same time, i.e. in harmony. There are many different types of scales, and these are just different palettes with different characteristics and flavors. It's important to realize that just because we have a predefined palette of what we think sounds good together, it doesn't mean that you can't go outside of that. Musicians can, and frequently do, use notes and chords that sit outside of their chosen palette, but when you're just getting started, it's important to understand the rules so that you can understand how to break them. So with that general overview out of the way, let's dive a little deeper. A scale is a series of notes starting from the root note or tonic and going up to the same note an octave above. Each type of scale uses a different set of notes from the 12 semitones available within that octave gap, and they may also use a different number of them as well, as we'll see later. In that case, we need a pattern or a formula for each type of scale to know which notes belong in our scale. So let's start by looking at the most common scale, the major scale. Starting from the tonic, we can apply a pattern of tones and semitones, also called whole steps and half steps, until we reach the octave, selecting the notes that we land on in the process. The formula for a major scale is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So let's start on C and use this formula to form our major scale. A tone up from C, we get D. A tone up from D, we get E. A semitone up from E, we get F. A tone up from F, we get G. A tone up from G, we get A. A tone up from A, we get B. And finally, a semitone up from B, we get C. And we're at the octave, so we stop here. Hey look, it's the C major scale. This works regardless of which note you start on. So if we were to start on D instead and apply the same formula, we would get these notes, which unsurprisingly is the D major scale. Alright, so now let's do the same thing with its counterpart, the minor scale. There are multiple commonly used types of minor scale, so it's worth noting that this version we're looking at is called the natural minor scale. Minor scales are created with this formula instead. This time, let's start from A and apply this formula. A tone up from A, we get B. A semitone up from B, we get C. A tone up from C, we get D. A tone up from D, we get E. A semitone up from E, we get F. A tone up from F, we get G. And a tone up from G, we get A again. And we stop here, and there we have our A minor scale. Alright, now you try the same thing, this time with D, and write the D minor scale in the comments. Or if that's too complicated, just leave us a like, it really helps our channel. The eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed something interesting about the formulas for major and minor scales. They're actually the same but shifted by 5 places. So what would happen if we shifted the major formula one step at a time? We've already said that this one is the natural minor scale, so what are all these other scales? These are the 7 modern modes. Ionian, what we call major, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian or natural minor, and Locrian. And if you noticed, the C major or Ionian and the A minor or Aeolian use the same notes, just shifted by 5 places. In the same way, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, and B Locrian all use the same 7 notes. So as you can see, an easy way to create all the modes is to play the C major scale, but start on a different note every time. Modes and their unique and distinctive musical flavors are a fascinating subject that deserves its own video. So if you'd like us to do a detailed video on modes, let us know in the comments. So this formula that we've been using so far creates what are called diatonic scales. In a diatonic scale, we always have 5 tone steps and 2 semitone steps. And the semitone steps are as far away from each other as possible. Now let's move on to another very common scale that is not diatonic, because it doesn't use that formula of 5 tones and 2 semitones that we saw before. the harmonic minor scale. The harmonic minor scale is very similar to the natural minor scale, but we raise the 7th degree by a semitone. So instead of having the 2 tones at the end, we have 3 semitones, or an augmented second interval, between the 6th and the 7th, and a semitone from the 7th back to the octave. So the harmonic minor scales formula ends up being tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, augmented second, semitone. As you can see, there are 3 semitones in that formula, and also that larger augmented second step, which is why the harmonic minor is not diatonic. You're probably already quite used to hearing this scale, as it's used across a wide range of classical, pop, rock, and metal music. So up to now, we've looked at diatonic scales and non-diatonic scales, but all of the scales we've mentioned have something in common. They're all heptatonic scales, hepta coming from the Greek for 7, because they all have 7 notes, if we don't count the octave. But there are other scales out there that use fewer notes, so let's check out the most common of these. Pentatonic scales use only 5 notes, and probably the most popular of the pentatonic scales is the minor pentatonic. You're probably very familiar with the sound of the minor pentatonic, especially in rock music and countless guitar solos and riffs. To build a pentatonic scale, it's often easier to start with the relative heptatonic scale and then remove 2 notes. So to build a minor pentatonic, we start at a minor scale and then remove the 2nd and 6th degrees. The major pentatonic scale is similar, except we remove the 4th and 7th degrees of the major scale. So that's it for Scales 101. Here is a playlist of more of our music theory videos, so go check them out, and I'll see you next time on Mixed Signals. Bye bye.